Welcome to Doctors at Work. My name's Matt Daniel, and this podcast is about doctors' careers. It's part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. Today's podcast is about leadership. Now, all of us are leaders, and all of us need good leadership skills. In this episode, Nitin and I reflect on how we learnt about leadership, the challenges we faced, and we talk about what good leadership looks like. Top tips include learning to manage yourself, knowing what success means to you personally, observing others, and asking for other people's critical feedback. Welcome, Nitin. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Matt, good to see you. So I'm a nearly retired consultant urological surgeon, and I also do a bit of work for the GMC in a sense that I am a co-vice chair for the Center for Race Equality in Medicine and a visiting professor for the Institute of Medicine in Bolton. But these things will slowly come to an end over the next few months, I imagine.
Yeah, thank you. And I know you've been a guest several times on the podcast, but the topic for today is leadership, and we're recording this on anniversary of Gandhi's birthday. And I know that Gandhi is somebody that you very much admire as a leader. And I wonder, could you tell me a little bit more about the reasons why you admire him as a leader?
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for asking me that. I think Mahatma Gandhi, as Mahatma means a great soul.
Mhm.
And he is known as Mahatma Gandhi in India. And basically, he is a person who is responsible mainly for India's independence from the British, which is a huge achievement. And his main style of protesting was non-violence. And I admire him for that he could move a huge nation on earth like Britain to offer independence to India using non-violence, and he had the respect of his people. The other reason why I respect him even more is that he was a human being who made mistakes, and he did get things wrong in his life. And it just makes him more like us in a sense that we all make mistakes. No one's perfect in this world. And though he was such a great soul, neither was he. So it's something that's attainable in a sense, and therefore more closer to us than one might imagine.
Mhm. And we're also recording this at a time where the world seems to be a very unrestful place. There's lots of things that certainly concern me as well, and violent protests rather than non-violent ones. So I'm interested in how did Gandhi manage to achieve that?
Gandhi managed to achieve this by actually using his image and his popularity within the people and the respect that he had gained in the first 60 odd years in his life when he lived in South Africa by standing up for himself, standing up for non-white people, and standing up as an immigrant in a foreign country. So that is where he started building his character. And when he came to India, he was already known as a barrister who had fought against unfairness and injustice. And so he already had an image which was very respectable when he came to India from South Africa. And that is what gained him the respect of the people. And then he always managed to practice nonviolence by pressurizing every community that became violent. And he was responsible in ensuring that there were no interreligious fights between Hindus and Muslims, which is something that used to happen and were often politically created because most people have lived peacefully side by side. But he used his way of protest by fasting unto death. And when there were fights and when there was violence, he would start fasting, not even eating or drinking anything, completely fast, sorry. he started by completely fasting without food and drink. Um, and that put people under pressure that they did not want to be responsible for such a great soul to die because of their fault. And that's how fighting would stop.
So it sounds very much that he had a stack of personal credibility that he'd built, not over a few months, not by doing an MBA, sort of not by being on some kind of a leadership training scheme, but he'd built personal credibility through years and decades of consistently turning up and having a consistent message and consistently standing up for what he believed, not being a perfect person by any stretch, as you say, but that credibility that built up after year of showing up and doing the same thing that he believed in. I'm interested in sort of for you yourself, Nitin. I know that you yourself have had a long and illustrious career and continue to. What's leadership to you personally?
Leadership to me depends on whether I'm the leader or the follower, because there are completely different aspects when one is a leader and one is a follower. So when one is a leader, till now, my biggest priority would have been a sense of balance, that maintaining a sense of balance everywhere. Because in today's world where, mainstream media, social media, and the virtual internet with the use of artificial intelligence, anything can be created, and this is rife. We need to be able to maintain a sense of balance. That is what I feel would have been the most important thing to me. But having seen what's happened in the world over the last few months, I feel that a leader who is peaceful and sorts matters out peacefully without resorting to violence would be my ideal leader. That's what I would say. As a follower, I would like a leader who would have the quality of warmth within them and interpersonal interaction. So this is not possible when we live in a massive society. So I don't expect somebody who is the prime minister of the country to look after me personally in that sense. But if I was a consultant in an NHS hospital, which is what our life has been, then I would expect the medical director to interact with me on a personal basis and come and meet me from time to time to say, how could he make my life better? So I think interpersonal warmth and care probably matter most to me as a follower.
I'm interested in that peaceful idea. So again, we talked about Gandhi, peaceful versus violent process, and again, if we translate that in the NHS, I know we haven't got violence in NHS context, but we've got this idea of being warm and people focused versus perhaps maybe at the other end being very much kind of outcomes focused. And performance focused and results focused, and I don't know about you, Nitin, but sort of certainly for large chunks of my life, and probably still so, or in fact definitely still so, I'm often kind of very focused on getting what the patient needs, what outcomes are needed, what my department needs, and that kind of often tends to drive certainly some of the things that I do, that often I'll be very vocal about things how I think they should happen. That's not to say that I don't listen. I listen to other people's opinions, but if I think the things should be a certain way, I'm very vocal. And for me, that sets up a tension between that being a really kind of strong advocate for what I think should be done, and balancing that with what you've talked about, that side of kindness and warmth. And have you got sort of tips for me, or how have you seen people balance those things well or not?
Balance is something that is not easy to achieve. And going back to me personally, I know that there are times when I have not really been balanced in my behavior as I see it, though perhaps my colleagues would never realize that. They would never realize the cauldron of fire or the difficulties that I feel within myself manifest themselves on the outside. But I think I did find, balancing things as a very difficult, thing to do during my time as a leader. But I wanted to go back to the violence thing. And yes, in the NHS, as doctors and nurses, we do not see violence in the physical sense, though there are the odd examples that sadly do take place. But we do see aggressive behavior in the form of nonverbal communication that comes across from senior figures within the health service. And that often is done not by violence or aggression, it's done by marginalizing people and making them as non-entities within the system. So if you are made to feel like a non-entity, then it builds up your emotions, feelings, and that can lead to burnout. So I would say a good leader should be a good interactor and try their best to bring the best out of colleagues by providing them with a safe space where they feel that it is a safe space to work, to express opinion without resorting to any sort of games. And interpersonal interaction should not come in the way of patient care and making good decisions for the department. Should the senior colleague find that something is not feasible, a request is not possible, then they can very well sit down and explain why this is not possible instead of completely ignoring your request. Another way that a senior colleague can cause trouble for a younger colleague is by threatening the referral to the General Medical Council. And that is a major issue because that can destroy people's lives. And this happened to me twice in the past, though it did not come from my medical colleagues. It came from patient families who felt that they'd been badly done by, but I was completely exonerated there. But in the first instance, I found that I was well supported. And in the second, I found that I was completely left in limbo. And I found that, good senior colleagues make a huge difference to our mental well-being and can prevent burnout if they support you appropriately. And eventually that matters with patient care, because if you're in a good situation yourself, then you will be looking after your patients better as they need to be looked after.
Tell me a bit more about yourself, because you said that there were times where you had this burning fire inside you, but on the outside nobody would know that this burning fire was there. So how do you handle that fire that's burning whilst on the outside you're this perfectly reasonable, calm and considerate person?
In one word, badly, I guess.
Okay.
But I think yes, I think there are different types of people, personalities. Some people internalize, their emotions, and some people let it rip on the person across them. So I'm probably the first type of person in that I take the hit myself, and I think it would have been nicer if I had learned to give some back to people who would not be helpful to me or who would not be nice to me. But that's something that I always struggled with, and it depends perhaps on how you've been brought up, your childhood environment, what sort of school you went to, being an immigrant, perhaps, or all these things can make a difference. And I suppose life experiences can affect you as well. So we are all different types of people, but the basic thing here is about when we internalize matters, we take a hit ourselves. And that's what I would advise people to deal with and see if they can, rationalize that better instead of.
I hope you're enjoying the show. Please click subscribe so you'll be notified when new episodes become available. This podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. You can be part of that mission too by forwarding this show to one person who you think might benefit from listening. Thank you. Now on with the show. I'm interested in how one learns to be a good leader? Because we started off talking about Gandhi, and he said that he was a good leader, and that was as a result of decades of showing up and doing what he believed in, rather than sort of going on a leadership course. And I know that for a lot of people in various healthcare systems, particularly people early in their career, people talk about leadership courses, degrees, etc. But how did you learn your leadership skills?
It sounds a bit like my retirement speech, but I managed to just stumble around. And I think it's because perhaps I was egotistical within myself. I was perhaps, thought too much of myself, to use a different set of words. And I did not perhaps ask for advice as I could have. But this is where, as a leader, I would have thought my leader could have sat me down and explained this to me candidly. Though in today's world, giving advice is not easy, because people will come back at you 10 times more strongly, and you might as well mind your own business. So it's a difficult path, but this is about building relationships. And I think if we have good relationships with our colleagues, then this sort of advice can be given more easily, instead of coming it like a top-down advice. So I think, but I can say this now at this point in time, when you're in a department or in a job, where, say, perhaps the senior doctor is handling 300 or 400 or 500 people, it may be difficult to actually do that. So I think that managing one's ego and oneself, having your feet firmly on the ground, and having a set of people who will give you honest feedback is important. And I think perhaps I didn't manage to get that. Partly my fault, but partly perhaps my environment was such. But I can think back today and reflect dispassionately about such things, because I'm now out of the system.
So there's a lot there about that kind of managing yourself. Forget about, as a leader, managing and influencing anybody else, but what you talked about was about managing yourself. And like if you talk about this fire, and yet you found a way of managing that wasn't destructive, or perhaps there's a way of managing that, isn't it? If you're very passionate and you're very forceful, there's a way of managing that that's not destructive. If you tend to internalize and take everything, there's a way of managing that that's not destructive. But whatever kind of person you are, it's recognizing that, but it's managing yourself in a way that's constructive rather than destructive to you and the people around you.
Yes, it's internal as well as external. It's important that when aggression builds up within you, then you come to communicate a little more aggressively, perhaps, with people. And that happens to people who are honest and simple folk, and I consider myself to be pretty honest, down to earth, perhaps simple in some ways as a person. And I feel that I was pretty honest in how I managed things. And I felt I had my aims were good, but sometimes I could have communicated more diplomatically and looked after myself, and being better in the way I interacted with colleagues. And perhaps that would have helped me do better. But then there is also a balance that you need to set here between whether you suck up to your seniors or you maintain your self-respect. And I felt for me that self-respect mattered more than anything else. And being successful is about, first of all, maintaining your self-respect and self-esteem. And I would no way want to be successful if people didn't offer me the respect that any human being deserves.
So there's lots of individualized things for me about if you think about what it is to be a leader, how it's individual. Because you said, for you, success is having that self-respect. For other people, success will be, becoming sort of chief exec or medical director or, a senior person in NHS England. And there's nothing wrong with either of those routes, is it? We're all different. And it's different people will define success differently.
Well, it depends on the path you use to be successful. If you're genuinely good, if you're open-minded, selfless, balanced, sensible, secure within yourself, a visionary, then you can be a good leader. But if you are a creeping type of leader who, gets promoted by being completely silent and just doing your job, yes, sir, no, sir, three bags full sort of leader, who then makes their way up to the top by knowing the right people and, if it involves cronyism, nepotism, racism, then that's not the sort of success I would want to see in anybody. That's not fair because they do say that in the health service, one is promoted to their maximum level of, promoted beyond capability is the buzzword that we use in the NHS. A lot of people get promoted well beyond what they're capable of. And that isn't right because then everybody down below suffers because you have somebody who isn't competent or capable enough to do what they're meant to do and do not have the vision or the understanding that that particular job requires.
So Nitin, it strikes me there's a bit of incompatibility here because on one hand we're saying that it's good that people stand up, it's good that people challenge, it's good that people stand up for what they believe in and ask some difficult question. But on the other hand, I'm wondering, are those the kind of people that really are likely to get promoted? And I don't think that's a healthcare or NHS specific issue. I would imagine that that's something that exists in the broader industry altogether. That people get promoted because they say yes and because they do as they're told. They do what the person that is promoting them asks of them. And if it's somebody who's a bit thorny, who asks difficult question, who pushes back, I'm wondering whether those kind of people really do get promoted. And I don't know sort of what your thoughts are on that, and also how can we put those two things together?
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, that's an important point. And I'd like to say that the world has got better over the last couple of decades because in my initial years as a consultant, I believe that if people spoke up, you would metaphorically end up in someone's backyard in a grave, so to say, not literally, but metaphorically. And I actually said this to somebody within the last month who was whistleblowing, and I said to them, make sure you don't get and end up in somebody's backyard in a grave because they were talking about freedom to speak up. But I believe that what now has happened is that there is a system which is better equipped and where things cannot be hidden as easily. And in that way, social media helps bring things out. So if one has something to bring up, then one can do it through many organizations which often are formed by groups of doctors themselves. And these organizations will support you and back you as necessary if you're fighting a battle that's valid for the profession. So I believe that things are better now, but still you can only go so high. And in a hospital, you can go up with the chief exec, but beyond that, things don't go any higher because things would get quashed and stifled in that sense. So speaking up is perhaps safer nowadays than it was a couple of decades ago, but it's still not good enough. And the GMC are celebrating Speaking Up Week recently. They've just done that. But I think there is more lip service than actual action.
Mm-hmm. And the people that listen to the podcast, Nitin, it's quite an international audience. So, both of us work in the NHS, and I would agree with you that certainly speaking up is much, much more encouraged than it was. And that's good. I still don't know if the people that speak up get promoted into leadership roles. So I guess that kind of would be, my question about sort of that kind of leadership and promotion. I think people do speak up more, and people are less likely to be in somebody's backyard. But do those people get rewarded for speaking up in the way that actually they probably ought to? I don't know.
I believe they are more likely to be marginalized than rewarded. That is the initial management of difficult people. But I believe that when somebody speaks up a lot and is supported by a populist crowd, then it is best to give them a position of responsibility, which in a way actually enables or makes them understand the difficulties that somebody in a leadership position would face. Because when you're in a responsible position, you have to look after everybody, not just yourself or not just your friends. So, in that sense, one way to silence a major critic is by putting them in a position of responsibility and ensure that there is proper governance to control their whims and fancies. But I do believe that most people get marginalized and sidelined because it's just too difficult to manage these difficult people. There's another aspect to that. I would say that with the presence of social media, everybody on planet Earth or everybody within the United Kingdom thinks that they are the prime minister for the United Kingdom. And everybody thinks that their opinion is the most important and most valid and most sensible opinion on a particular topic. Now, we can't have that happening. So this is where the sense of balance in a leader comes out and becomes the most important thing, that whose point is valid and whose is just shouting from the rooftops. Just because somebody gets 1,000 likes on Twitter doesn't mean that they are right. That is just perhaps populist thinking or AI or robots intervening and giving them those 1,000 likes. But does the suggestion work? Is that suggestion effective? Is that suggestion correct? And is it the right thing for that particular situation? So these are the things that a balanced leader would actually assess, and then they would make a decision about how they can take a matter forward.
I wonder if I could bring us to a close, Nitin, and perhaps if I could ask you maybe to summarize what we talked about, or maybe give me your top tips for doctors at work when it comes to leadership.
Before we close, I might just mention the imposter syndrome. Because the imposter syndrome is an issue that matters and is discussed by most leaders. Having an imposter syndrome is both a good and a bad thing. The bad thing is that sometimes can make you doubt yourself. Mm-hmm. But the good thing is, I believe, that it keeps you down to earth and stops you from becoming arrogant, self-important, which are the qualities for a bad leader. That's what I would say. But an ideal leader would, like I said earlier, be a facilitator. He would be meritocratic. He would have good communication skills. He would be selfless, open-minded, sensible. He should be secure within himself and not worry about other people throwing darts at him. And he should be a visionary. Mm-hmm. He should listen to his colleagues, to his followers, and he should not be discriminatory. Mm-hmm. And the way one can be a good leader is by having a group of people surrounding you who will give you honest feedback. Or even a better way is to get feedback from people who actually dislike you and use that as a way of to improve yourself. When I say get feedback from people who dislike you, is people who dislike you but are still principled enough to give honest, constructive feedback. So I feel that getting feedback from people you consider difficult in your day-to-day working life would help leaders improve themselves, because then you are then you're listening with an open mind and then trying to become a better person. Each of us every day is trying to be better than we were yesterday.
And maybe actually one more question, if I think for the younger colleagues listening, younger doctors, how should she or he start their leadership journey and development?
One word: observe.
Uh-huh.
When we are young, if we observe how our leaders behave and see who is successful, who is not, who is popular, who is not, who is honest or who is less honest, and who you admire for their good qualities, one could learn a lot. And as surgeons, that's what we do. We move across 5 different units in our training, and we see 5 different sets of consultants, and we pick up the operative approach from different people and create our own way of operating on a patient by picking up the good things from each consultant that we work with, not using the bad, their faults, and learning from that. So observe and learn and make the most of it. That's what I would say.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Nitin.
Thank you, Matt. That's great. Good to see you again.